That business ended up failing. It's mainly because I took a risk. I borrowed $5 million, built a complete new plant, and I didn't have enough good people around me. I guess I was in my father's mould, always do it yourself, tell people what to do, the old management style. And it was only subsequently when I worked for a large multinational that I really started to see the other side of why these big organisations are so successful.
Peter Dean has lived and breathed business from the ground up, starting in a family business and rising to senior management in a global firm. He now guides Kiwi business owners through their toughest challenges to achieve success. Why should someone take on a business advisor?
As an SME business owner, you're generally doing all the urgent stuff. The best time to start working on the business is today. If there's one element that we need to do is plan. And by devoting a bit of time each week to working on the business and planning, you can identify what the key things are and get those incremental improvements over a period of time. The essential thing in a business is to keep score. Like a rugby match, you need to know where you are. How are you doing each month? Are you making money? What's your gross margin? Where is your profit actually coming from?
In New Zealand, small to medium-sized enterprises make up about 97% of all businesses. They employ over 600,000 people or so. However, the failure rate is high. Just last year, there was about 3,690 companies that went into liquidation. Peter, who are you and why should people be listening to this episode?
I'm a business advisor. I work for an organisation known as Prime Strategies. We're a national organisation, 40 business advisors who specialise in working with SME businesses, small to medium enterprises. And I guess we're all pretty experienced in business. I've been in business all my life in one form or another. And, the time came when I wanted to change from the corporate life and really enjoy now giving back and helping business people achieve their dreams.
Why should people be listening to our conversation today?
I guess it's like anything in life. You should be constantly learning. And being in business is not easy. It's challenging. And if you keep an open mind, and listen to new ideas and network and meet various people, you're just going to be growing and you're going to be better for it. So hopefully I've got something to contribute.
What's life is like working for yourself?
I love it. I did it many, many moons ago before I got into the corporate world. It's got its upside and downside, but I very much enjoy it now because, previously when I ran a business, I had 100 staff, but now it's just me, so it's a lot easier. But it's very rewarding, getting back into that area where you're the master of your own destiny.
If you take a look back at your life, you've been working for yourself for how long now?
Oh, well, I've only been a few years doing what I'm doing now, but I've been in business 45 years, would you believe? I started working for my father when I was probably a 13-year-old, sweeping the factory floors on Saturday mornings and then working in the factory on holidays. And by the time I got to university and I knew the business quite well. And after my OE, I came back and basically started to run the production element of the business. It was a commercial laundry in Melbourne, so it had lots of moving parts. We ended up with about 100 staff, so it was a pretty substantial operation.
What do you think that the most successful, the reason why you were successful was what?
Well, yeah, it's interesting. My father was of the old school, very hard taskmaster, but he was an accountant. He knew the numbers. But it was a bit of a double-edged sword because, most advice for people or children going into their parents' businesses work for someone else to begin with. And I didn't have that opportunity because my father's health, and he ended up dying reasonably young. But, I think the other side of the coin is you only learn one perspective. And it harks back to what I said a moment ago. You need to be open to lots of ideas. And, that business ended up failing. And it was mainly because I took a risk. I borrowed $5 million, built a completely new plant, and I didn't have enough good people around me. I guess I was in my father's mould, always do it yourself, tell people what to do, the old management style. And it was only subsequently when I worked for a large multinational that I really started to see the other side of why these big organisations are so successful. And that's what I really enjoy about what I'm doing now, because I take the best of what the big organisations do and tailor it for the smaller businesses.
It sounds like you have probably began to understand the importance of team.
Oh, absolutely.
Like who's on your team. Is this why you became a business advisor, to be the good team member on other businesses?
Yeah. Look, I think throughout your life, you probably need to reinvent yourself a few times. And, it's sort of later in life that I've now reinvented myself after 22 years with the last company. But, I think you things run their course. And unless you reinvent yourself, have new challenges, then you can become stale. And I think the worst job is in the world is a job where you're not busy enough, you're not challenged enough, and you just coast along. It's a very old saying, but I love the adage, you get out of work, or you get out of a job what you put into it. It's so, so true. But I think, as a community, perhaps some of us have lost sight of that.
Yeah. Probably have learned so much throughout the years, being a business advisor in terms of running your own consultancy. What are some of the things, maybe three things that you've learned over the years that made you a successful business advisor?
Well, I think one of the most important things, everything comes back to people. And one of the most important things is understanding your client. And this goes for any business, I guess more so when you're dealing in this sort of business. But, it's not about coming in and telling people what to do. I can do this better, I can do that better. It's about understanding their business, but more so understanding them. Because quite often what's holding people back in business is themselves and the perceptions and their, what they feel they can do and can't do, or their lack of perhaps knowledge in certain areas. A lot of people in business start out as being experts in their area, whether it's a trade or a profession, and then some of them become what I have termed accidental business people. They find themselves with something that's growing, and I've got to employ someone, and I've got to do this and that, but they don't all have the necessary experience or toolkit to actually do all those things, that multitude of disciplines that you need to run a successful business. And the other thing is, businesses can be very lonely. Many of the hundreds of thousands of small businesses in New Zealand, they're sole directors. So they don't necessarily have people as a sounding board, and that's a very important part of being successful in business.
Why should someone take on a business advisor?
Oh, lots and lots of reasons.
Give me the top most important.
Ones, probably the top one is that as an SME business owner, you're generally doing all the urgent stuff. You're in there, you're providing the service, you're doing the day-to-day things. And probably in the back of your mind, you understand the importance of working on the business, but a lot of people never get round to it. And, I meet a lot of people that say, yeah, I know I should be doing that. Or, I can see the advantages of using you as an advisor in the business, but the time's not right. Or I haven't got enough time at the moment. We'll wait until the economy improves. We'll wait till the sales get better. And my advice is, well, things won't improve for you in the business until you start working on it. So the best time to start working on the business is today. And because, the other thing is there's usually no silver bullets. If people have got problems or challenges in their business, some of them can be solved pretty quickly. There's low-hanging fruit, which we always try to identify, but a lot of them are slow burners. And this is one of the strong elements in working on a business is the planning. If there's one element that we need to do is plan. And by devoting a bit of time each week to working on the business and planning, you can identify what the key things are and get those incremental improvements over a period of time. And, I don't pretend that, it's a rare business that you can click your fingers and make things better overnight or get the nth degree out of it. But if you just get 1% better in one area every week or every month, and you're consistent and you build on those improvements, then, where are you going to be at the end of the year? You're going to be so much better off for it.
What would you say the number one thing that people struggle with the moment that you have a meeting with them and you're looking at their business and they're going, what I'm trying to ask is, what are the biggest mistakes people make by not having a business advisor?
Yeah, I guess it depends, and it depends where the business is in the business cycle. I mean, if you're starting a business, usually you're enthusiastic. You've got this idea. It's going to work. You're confident in your own ability, and you'll spend money on fitting out a shop or advertising and this and that. But often people don't see bouncing things off a business advisor and getting them involved in the early stages. They don't necessarily rate that as a priority. But if you don't do it, you can make a huge mistake and do your dough. So I'd advise any sort of startups, get a competent business advisor, make sure that you've got your plan. And this is, as I said, a key part of any successful business. And a business will, as it grows, it will develop. There'll be different challenges coming along. Now, if we move along to perhaps a more mature business who is perhaps going through a growth phase, other challenges are thrown up. There are cash flow challenges. There are challenges with having to move from doing it all yourself to delegating and growing your team. And these are the tricks that many people miss because they just do what they know.
Okay.
And then they end up having a stressful existence or not having enough hours in the day or all these things, because it's not all about financial success. You need to succeed financially, obviously, to have continuity and a future, but it's also about enjoyment. And I just love business, and I get enthusiastic about people's businesses when I can see how they can do better, how they can reduce stress, spend more time with the family, end up with an asset at the end of their life that's got some value, which they can sell and retire on.
You mentioned cash flow.
Yes.
Someone who's owning a business right now and they've been running for 4 years, 5 years, and they are running up against a block of cash flow, what would you advise them for?
Well, cash flow is essential at any time. I mean, a business can survive for a certain amount of time not making a profit, but it can't survive for much time at all unless you keep on tipping money into it without positive cash flow. So it all comes to planning. And this is one of the key things. Many business people aren't necessarily savvy in the financial side. I mean, that's why you've got an accountant. That's why you bring in specialists. But I see many people with the Xero, and Xero is a great system, but people who perhaps don't understand the accounting principles behind it, and they can make a pig's ear of it. Because, of course, the essential thing in a business is to keep score, like a rugby match. You need to know where you are, how you're doing each month.
In terms of what are we talking about here?
In terms of your numbers.
Yeah.
Are you making money? What's your gross margin? Where is your profit actually coming from? Because it's all about a famous Kiwi quote is, we want to do everything that makes the boat go faster. That's what we want to concentrate on. If it doesn't make the boat go faster, don't want to know about it. Same's true in business. Let's spend time on the things to make the business better. And that's multifaceted. It'll be financial, it'll be human resources, it'll be sales.
But if you're looking at cash flow and someone comes up to you and say, I have an issue with cash flow, what sort of advice would you give them as
Well, the first thing is,
example?
do you do a cash flow projection? Now, a lot of people do things either on the back of the envelope or up here. But what you should do is a simple, and you can just use an Excel spreadsheet and do a cash flow projection. It's the same as essentially a household budget. What's coming in? When do I expect that to come in? What's going out? When do I expect that to go out? And that's totally different to a profit and loss, of course, because profit and loss won't take account of your loan repayments and things like that. Your capital portion, because that's a balance sheet item. But you've got to consider all those things, tax obligations. when is your tax get a full due? When do I have to, simple things like, should I keep another account and pay a bit in every month for the GST?
Yeah.
They're sensible things to do, so you don't get to the end of 6 months or 2 months and say, haven't got enough to meet the taxman's bill. So it all comes down to planning, whether that's
and recording things.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And as I said, in a rugby game, the score up there on the scoreboard is giving you an idea of how the teams are performing. You need your financials to tell you how the business is performing.
So why would you have a business advisor telling you about your cash flow, whereas you could just have an accountant help you create a cash in and a cash out? Or
and accountants do. A lot of accountants do business advisory type work, but essentially the thing with an accountant is they might have 200-300 clients, and they're essentially looking at things like tax compliance and looking in a rear vision mirror of performance. One of the big things with the business advisor is we're not there indefinitely working with the client. We want to teach the client. We want to empower the client in good business practice. And in order to do that, part of it's also discipline and accountability. So I'm a strong advocate of working with my clients every week for a couple of hours. If you work with them once a month, it's too long between drinks. We want to get business people in the habit of working on the business and making effective change. One of the biggest problems I find with business people is some of them, they know what they should be doing, but they don't do it. So it's about, okay, you're making a commitment, 10 o'clock every Thursday, I'm going to be here and we're going to be working on the business. And that's very powerful. So as I said, a director who doesn't have a fellow director, just being that external third set of eyes or second set of eyes to just see things and advise.
Yeah. So like you must have spoken to and worked with so many businesses.
Yeah.
How many are we talking?
Oh, look, I've been doing this a couple of years. I mean, I've basically got the first client I ever had because their needs have changed. But I've worked with many businesses in a variety of industries because the essential thing is you don't need the industry knowledge. We don't come in and say, I'll teach you how to change tyres in your tyre business or how to paint a house in your painting business. That's the technical side. We're not about that. What we're about is, hey, is your business cash flow positive? Is it making money? Are you looking after your staff? Are you fulfilling your health and safety obligations? Are you building some resilience into your business so when the bad times do come, the business will still survive? Are you getting enjoyment out of your business?
Yeah.
Where do you want to be personally in 10 years? Because that informs where the business has to be in 10 years' time.
In New Zealand, small to medium-sized enterprises make up about 97% of all businesses, and they employ over 600,000 people or so. However, the failure rate, as you know, is high, and contributing factors include poor cash flow management, inadequate financial planning, and limited access to advisory resources. Tell us a little bit about how significant it has been in New Zealand, specifically liquidations. Just last year, there was about 3,690 companies that went into liquidation. And obviously, there was also insolvency practitioners that highlight that early intervention can help prevent closures. Can you firstly, let's tap into what it means to be liquidated, for people who don't know those terms, and what it means to be insolvent, and then get into your insights and analysis of what's going on?
Sure. Well, let's start with insolvency. If a business is insolvent, it essentially means the business cannot pay its debts when they fall due. Now, if they owe a lot of money to the bank, that might be on a long-term facility. So I'm not talking about having that money in the bank and able to pay that back immediately. But, basically most accounts are by the 20th of the following month. If you can't pay those on time because you haven't got the funds, then you may be technically insolvent. Doesn't mean the business will collapse. And I think probably there are many businesses trading in New Zealand that are technically insolvent. They're living hand to mouth. The problem is that when those businesses, if the businesses are like that in good trading times, then when they come into a recession or when their sales drop, that's when they get into trouble. So, once again, this is the importance of analysis in the business, having your finger on the pulse, knowing your numbers. A lot of businesses are run by gut feel, which can sometimes work fine. But if that gut feel's not right, or if you're ignoring the obvious, they can come to a stage where they have to be liquidated. Now, liquidations aren't always a bad thing. Liquidations of a company means that the company's assets are going to be sold off, the debts are going to be paid out, and the company will cease trading. You can choose to do that yourself. Maybe you want to retire and there's not a market for the business, so you liquidate the company. Where liquidations are more fraught and dramatic is where creditors, people you owe, put you into liquidation, or the banks or the taxman puts you into liquidation because you're not paying them. And that's a scenario you don't want to get into, because not only do liquidators come in and start running the business, but they take money out of the business, so it's extra money going out of the business, but they're essentially working for the people who are owed money. And if they try to sell the business, it might be a more fire sale type scenario. They don't get the true worth of the business, and they wrap it up, and you might end up with nothing. And you might end up with, because you've given guarantees as a director, great personal debt. So not all insolvent business is not necessarily going to go into liquidation, but it's probably the first warning sign. If you can't pay your debts when they're due, it's something you need to give attention to.
What do you see happening in 2024 for businesses, and maybe even 2025 when it comes to liquidations? Like, what's going to happen? What do you predict?
Yeah, well, this year's been a tough year so far. I mean, there've been more. I think liquidations are up 22% on the previous year. I know May's liquidations were up substantially, and I think they were the highest in 10 years for May. And I think that's come with those marginal businesses going into Christmas, where cash flow usually suffers a bit with places being closed, and then coming out into a poorer sales environment, economic environment this year, and just some of them being really hard up against the wall and not having the funds to continue. I'm generally optimistic about next year and even later this year, because for those businesses that are switched on, there's huge opportunity. And after all, a lot of the problems we're facing in the business community at the moment with slow sales, it's just due to people's expectations. They're hanging on to their money. They're deferring things, and they can't do that forever. Life goes on. And I'm seeing some signs now where in some industries and some businesses, the order books are picking up and sales are picking up because, life goes on. People have got to spend the money. If you're in business, you've got to spend the money. Interest rates, we know, are pivotal, but at the same time, that feeds into expectations. So, we've just had a low inflation figure come out, and that's great, because that will build the confidence, and then hopefully August, October, there might be a drop in interest rates by the Reserve Bank, and that'll feed into people's optimism as well. So for businesses who plan and plan to reap the opportunities when times improve, now is a great time, because you can actually prepare yourself for it to capture those opportunities.
So are you saying that instead of not spending money on your business to improve it, to make it ticking along better, it actually is a good idea to do that right now? Because
absolutely.
Especially in a time of slowdown, so that when you do have the time of good,
you can capitalize
economy,
on it.
You capitalize on it.
Yeah. And I mean, it doesn't mean some businesses don't have to make hard choices. If you employ people and you haven't got the work for them, first and foremost, you've got to batten down the hatches, cut your cloth, and make sure that you can survive. But on the other hand, letting good people go and then needing them back when the business or the demand increases, that presents a problem, because you probably won't be able to get them back. You'll have to start again with finding good people. But I'm all about doing more with the same resources. So there's so much opportunity in many businesses to do better, and you don't have to spend money to do it. And one of the ways is harnessing the power of your team. I said earlier, many business people, when they start small, they do everything themselves. They've got to learn to use their team as they grow. They've got to learn to trust their team, to delegate, because you try to do it all as you grow, it won't work. So it's all about those sort of things. And it's not just about having team meetings. It's about putting in expectations of productivity rates, things like that. And it doesn't have to be draconian. It's just that understanding. If employees know what's expected of them, they enjoy it more than knowing, oh, the boss seems a bit angry at me. Why? So it's just that communication that's so important, and that mentoring of your team.
Because you have probably touched on this as to why people start businesses.
Yeah, well, there are generally said to be three main reasons. Number one is to be their own boss. Number two is to earn more money. And number three is to have more time off. Now, you start your own business, I guess you're your own boss, although, some might say the boss is the bank because I owe them money. But number two and three don't always come to pass. Have more time off. I think you'll speak to a lot of business people who just work longer hours when they get into business themselves. Earn more money, if you're lucky, but that can take some time to build the business up. And so, it's just not, being in your own business is just not a license to print your own money. Far from it.
But as we all know, that starting your own business takes time to grow, as you were just saying. And so those things, like, you're not going to have freedom and you're not going to have a lot of money to start with. But over time, it's going to be a good idea to do that. And so if someone is thinking about starting their own business, what is sort of advice would you have for them?
Well, one of the most important things is to understand who your market is. I mean, you might have this great idea to do something, and you might fall in love with it, and it's your baby. And but it's like selling your house. You think, oh, this house is going to sell well. It's such a great house. It is to you. But is what you're putting together as a business, is there a demand out there? There mightn't be. So do your market research. Do some polling of people, focus groups or whatever. Your ideal's appealing to you. Is it appealing to other people? What's your target market? And, that feeds into a part of the planning process. Working capital is a huge one. A lot of businesses fail because they run out of money. Maybe the first 12 months they expected to earn more money than they are. So
how do they go about that? How do you go about that?
Well, it's all about, once again, sitting down and using, say, a business advisor or a trusted colleague who's got some experience and doing a business plan. And I'm not talking about, yes, you might have to do a business plan to satisfy the banks, but you need a plan that's not something that's then going to go in the bottom drawer. It's got to be something that's living and breathing, and you're revisiting it and you're changing it as it will need to be changed. Most of us plan for a life like this where it's constant. But, life is rarely uneventful. Things happen. We had COVID-19, for heaven's sake. You had recessions, you have other things, you have floods, you have problems with staff. I mean, lots of things can come along, and we essentially don't plan for those things. We just plan for, okay, well, I've got this widget that I'm going to sell and people are going to want it. And when they don't come to your shop or whatever, you scratch your head. So it's all about planning. It's all about getting the expertise, getting your ducks in a row, and measuring your performance. And, it's one thing to have a good profit and loss and know your performance every month, but it's better to have KPIs, figures that you can say, a door count. If you're in retail, a door count. How many people are coming through the door? How many of those people buy? Why do those others not buy? And be very analytic about what's going on in your business.
So this is like the working on the business. So do you think if those businesses, the 3,690 businesses or companies that went into liquidation, if they had implemented these techniques, they would have been less likely to lose the plot, really. Not lose the plot, but just go into liquidation.
Some of them, remembering that some of those liquidations were initiated by the owners for reasons other than poor business performance. But yeah, the ones that fail unexpectedly, that's probably the key word, unexpectedly. You wake up one day and it's not going so well, and you live in hope that next month's sales are going to pick up, but it's all about action. It's all about being proactive. All of us can look in a rear vision mirror and say, oh, we should have done this, that, and this. But really what you need to do is say, well, okay, in the good times, things are going well. What are the risks ahead? Where things go wrong? It might be a competitor coming across the ditch from Australia and getting into your nice little niche. What are you going to do then? You need to front foot it and have a plan. And cover off all those areas and get assistance in the areas where it's not your expertise, which might be marketing. I mean, we use an accountant for our tax returns. We use a lawyer for the legal things. We use SEO companies and website companies because we're not experts in those. We ought to be an expert as a business in what we're trying to do, but we bring in those specialists where necessary.
Yeah. I agree. And, talking about being open to help, being open to getting someone of an expertise in this area to help you out. What have you found in terms of culture and people in New Zealand, the Kiwi culture of how they handle that kind of thing, and how do they handle their business and how they look at it?
Yeah, that's a very good point, because, I think the typical middle-aged male stoic number 8 wire is, I can do it myself. And, a lot of them do, and they're highly successful. But I just think back to when I was a 30-something-year-old. My father had taught me everything. I thought I knew everything. I didn't. And my advice to me back then would be, get some good people around you who are strong in those areas that aren't areas of expertise. So, that's the main thing. I think, people don't want to admit that they've got areas where they're not so good, or they haven't got the expertise. The other thing is there are certain things we all hate doing. I mean, I came across a businessman who had a very successful business, orders that he couldn't fulfill, but he neglected his paperwork. And he had unopened envelopes, and he had, thousands of unreconciled transactions on his Xero account. And he didn't know where he was in terms of the business performance. Plus, he had people knocking on the door like the IRD, just because wasn't that he didn't know how to do these things, he neglected them. It was something he wasn't interested in doing. He could have paid an external bookkeeper $60 an hour to do all of that. Simple. I'm not suggesting he does it himself, but make sure you don't neglect the things that are important for the ongoing business.
Definitely there's a challenging environment right now with SMEs, and it's been made worse with mental health issues, among business owners, driven by the pressure of isolation of entrepreneurship. The efforts are being made to provide, better support and resources for these business owners to improve their success. Can you tell me, what sort of advice, not advice, but what do you know of the magnitude of this issue? How big is it in New Zealand?
Well, I mean, one person doesn't know everything. Most people don't know everything, and mostly they can't do everything, but it's when they try, when they're that stoic nature, and they go on and they try, and the weight of it all gets too much for them, that people can end up in a very bad space and very unproductive. And in fact, it can also lead to people freezing in their businesses and not making decisions. And that's one of the worst things you can do, not making a decision. Okay, I've got cash flow problems. My debtors are far too outstanding. I know I've got to attend to that, but I've got to do this first and that first. And they freeze and they don't make decisions. And this is, I guess it's human nature. You get into a space where you can become quite ineffective, and things just can go from bad to worse. So It's all about asking for help, asking the right people for help and support.
Well, when it comes to mental health, though, what do you think the extent of it is out there in terms of the business owners suffering from mental health issues like isolation and nervousness and anxiety, depression, the things like that really it's quite hurting them. Do you see that in your own practice?
Yes, yeah, with conflict or financial struggle. I mean, we've seen it quite a bit on the media. There's been a focus in recent years on the primary sector and farmers, and that's a classic case of isolation, both physical and in terms of being the only person perhaps running that business. But yeah, look. Mental health issues go right throughout the community, and if you're worried about paying the bills, that's what keeps you up at night. And that's one of the things I often ask a new client or a prospective client: what keeps you up at night? Because if you're worried about how to pay the wages next week, you're not going to be worried about a 5-year plan. So one of the first things I do with my clients is, let's get rid of all those worries. Get rid's the wrong expression. Let's deal with them. And take the right steps so you can do the longer term planning and we don't get into that situation again.
Yeah. What are the signs and symptoms of a business struggling?
Well, financials obviously one, not meeting your debts as they fall due. But other things, I mean, there can be many signs. Poor customer service.
I'm glad that you touched on the poor customer service.
Yeah.
I did cut you off, but I really want to say something about how important it is to quickly respond to emails and phone calls with your customers, and like, can you speak into that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a pet topic of mine. When I started in business, there were no emails, there were no mobile phones. You had either a telephone call, a landline, or a letter. And that's how you communicated with your customers, obviously, unless you went and knocked on their door. And the telephone in particular, that was the go-to. If a customer needed something, they would ring you. If you needed to speak to them, you'd ring them. These days, we've got texting, which has become perhaps bigger in some respects, and we've got emails. The first rule of customer service I was always taught is pick up the phone. Don't let that phone ring. But today it's people let their phone go to voicemail, or they don't pick up at all, or they'll send a text rather than speak to someone. With emails, I mean, absolutely essential part of life these days, but sometimes they go completely unanswered. Sometimes it's days before they're answered. My message to business people is the single best way to impress your customers or potential customers is answer the phone. Answer that email promptly. The message that sends to a customer is, you're important to me. And the opposite's true of, if you don't answer the phone, you don't get back to them, you're not important to me. So it's rule 101 of customer service. And I can't understand why people don't do it, because there's a big lot of the community out there, business community, that don't put that priority in place and don't train their staff to believe that their first task, everyone's first task, I believe, in a business is customer service. Doesn't matter if you're the storeman, the salesman, or the office lady. If the phone rings, pick it up. Absolutely essential.
So are you touching on a bit about getting humanity back into business?
I think so. I mean, I don't know if young people or some people these days have an aversion to speaking on the phone. But, rather than send someone an email, rather than text them, pick up the phone and talk to them. I know that can be sometimes not the way we do it these days, but I think, getting the humanity back into business rather than just being completely transactional, I think it's a huge trick that lots of people are missing these days.
So, as you know, we've kind of touched on quite a number of challenges that business owners can face. We talked about mental health. If we are going to be talking about mental health, you have the depression and anxiety, sadness, worry, loneliness, you name it. And entrepreneurship, people feel that they get this imposter syndrome. Do you experience imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I think I've experienced it. I think I've experienced it when I started as a business advisor, until I realised that, hey, I know actually a lot more than I thought I knew, and I can be of help. Yeah, look.
But when you were in the moment, in that phase of feeling that you had the imposter syndrome, how did it feel?
Yeah, it felt. I mean, I think most people want to do a good job. Most people want to provide a quality service or product. They want to help others, and your self-talk can undermine you, of course. And we all know the importance of power of positive thinking and this sort of thing. But
does it work though? Power of positive thinking?
Absolutely, absolutely. But it's something you've got to work on. We all have bad days and good days. We all can have negative thoughts enter our mind, and when you're talking about depression, that's when things overwhelm you, I guess. And a lot of us have sort of been there in that scenario. And we count on the support of our loved ones and our colleagues and whatnot. But if we bottle it up and we don't take that step to get help, or we don't have that motivation and that power of positive thinking, that's when it can all go downhill.
Do you think that the positive thinking is necessary to succeed in business?
Oh, definitely.
Do you think it's the only thing that is necessary to succeed in business?
No.
Well, because when I think about positive thinking, I think, okay, I'm going to think a happy thought. But is there more to that than just a thought?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the basic of business at the end of the day is the business has got to be financially viable. I mean, you can be doing what you love, what you've dreamed of, but if it's not going to pay the bills, it ain't going to last. So that's the nuts and bolts of it. So unless you're a government that gets all this tax money, or you rely on donations, I mean, you still got to get the donations through the door. So there's a sales job that's got to be done there. But at the end of the day, yeah, a business needs, its lifeblood is cash. It needs to earn more than it pays out in order to survive and grow and thrive.
You've just, you've just sat down with someone who's got in your service.
Mm-hmm.
What is that going to look like? What is the first thing you're going to ask them? And actually, walk me through something. Walk me through things that you haven't spoken about yet, in in a different way.
Okay.
And say, okay, let me look at your business plan, and then let me look at your marketing plan. Let me look at your this and this and this. So you're actually helping people walk them through what it's like to sit down with an advisor.
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
is going to be like, we could cut that clip and it's almost like,
Well, that starts before they even sign up with me. That starts with me understanding if I can add value, because I won't work for them unless I can add value for them over and above what my cost is.
Let's say you have figured out that you can add value, and you've sat down on the table, and what is the first thing you're going to tell them, and what is going to, and then how is the meeting going to look like, and and how often do people need advisors and stuff like that? So if someone has just signed up to a business advisor, okay, they've signed up with you, what is the first thing that you're going to ask them?
Probably what's keeping you awake at night. The reason I ask that is, and I might have said it earlier, is there's no point in us looking at a 5-year or a 10-year plan, strategic planning, if there are some immediate concerns. And quite often those concerns will be, might be cash flow, data collection, financial, could be HR. I've got these people that I've got problems with, or I've got this issue at the moment. So what we want to do initially is reduce the business owner's stress. It's not about coming in there and giving them a whole lot of tasks to do. It's about me coming in and saying, okay, where are the problems at the moment? What should we deal with first? And that's certainly the first step. And some of those steps might be great opportunities where we can quickly get them some more money in the bank. I mean, they might be overstocked. They might have redundant stock that they're better off flicking, converting into some money rather than it just sitting there in their warehouse. So that's really the essential thing before we look at a longer term plan. The second step is for me to actually understand the business. Last thing any good business advisor does is come into a business and start telling the business owner what to do. We get into that business, we learn about it, we want to know the business intimately in terms of how it works, what systems it's got in place, what's your lease agreement like, have you got good and up-to-date employment agreements in place, all that plethora of information before we give any advice, because we'd be bad business advisors if we didn't do that. And we also, I guess, part of the initial journey is learning about the business person themselves and understanding what's important to them. And to that end, very early in the piece, we'll sit down with the business person and their partner usually, and we'll do a business, a personal plan for them. We'll say, well, what do you want out of life? What do you want to achieve? Where do you want to be in 10 years? Because there's no point doing that in isolation for the business without understanding what the couple or the individual wants. Because if the individual wants to be retired in 10 years lying on a beach, then we've got to say, well, okay, what's the business need to achieve in order to get you that? So the personal vision is very, very important early on, that we understand that and that they understand it. Because, after all, most people spend more planning their annual holidays than they do planning their life. How many people don't have a plan? Or if they have a plan, it's up here. And I always say, if it's up here, it's a dream. If it's written down and shared, it's an actual plan. And that's often what it's all about, pulling out what's important, how are we going to get there, and writing it down and keeping people accountable, keeping the business owner accountable, having a goal and saying, well, how are we going to reach that goal? What are the steps we need to take? And if those steps, if we say, well, in 3 months we want to be here with our sales, for instance, and we're not getting there, we need to say, well, that's not working. What do we need to do differently? So it's all about prioritizing, as you should do in your business anyway. And that's the whole reason we exist as business advisors, because business owners don't tend to prioritize the longer term, and they're putting out fires perhaps all the time, or what we want to do is look at, well, why is that fire happening in the first place? What can we do to stop that from happening?
So basically, a better performing business is a better economy, and the better economy, it's good for everybody. And
it's good, as you said earlier, about mental health. I mean, I'm a great believer in it's a great thing running your own business. You can get a lot of joy out of it. But so often people get on that treadmill and it can end in disaster. And it doesn't have to be that way if it's properly planned. And if you realise that, oh, my baby, that dream I had, it's actually not going to cut it because the demand's not there, or there's competitors who can do it cheaper or whatever. So
and be open about not doing the business, because
absolutely, yeah. I mean,
it may not be right for you, or
yeah. There are a lot of people, for every guy that's made $1 million or $1 billion or whatever, he's probably failed a few times before. Now, they're risk takers, so there's an element of risk, and some of them are going to fail, but you reduce the chances of failure if you plan, if you get advice, if you do research, if you know your numbers. And that's the key thing. And it doesn't matter. I mean, I'm talking, I guess, about startups, but it's just as important in a more mature business. Things can happen, and are you going to weather the storm? You've got to stay one step ahead of the competition. You've got to understand what the trends are in your sales. Oh, we're not selling as much as that. Why? We still might be very profitable, but hey, is there something I can tell from these figures that is giving me a bit of a heads up? So yeah, lots of tricks. But the key message is all businesses can do better. So many of the businesses I work with and my colleagues work with, they're not in dire straits at all, but they recognise they can do better, but they haven't got the resources as a small business to do it because they don't have a paid, an employee who's an accountant and HR person and a sales manager and a production manager. The individual business owner often initially wears all those hats, and they can't do everything perfectly. It's about getting that expertise where the expertise is not in the business currently.
Peter, thank you for being on the show. Appreciate you, giving us your insights and thoughts and adding a lot of value to the viewers and our audience who hopefully have got a lot out of this. Something that I like to do at the end of the interview and our conversation is to find out from you what sort of notes in your journal have you recently written, pieces of advice or wisdom that that you can share.
I love sayings. I love quotes, and there are so many neat quotes out there, and they very succinctly convey a lot. And one of them, the favourite ones that I wrote down recently, and I'll have to remember this, I mightn't be verbatim, but it was Henry Ford. He said, if you think you can, you're right. If you think you can't, you're also right. So it gets back to what we were saying, the power of positive thinking. Often it's you as an individual that are stopping yourself from achieving something. I can't do that. I haven't got the time to do that. Well, you're right. If you say you haven't got the time, you haven't got the time. If you say, hey, I need to make time to do that, help me make the time, because I know that's important. I know we can achieve this and it'll be great for the business. You can. So, very, very good quotation.
Peter, how can people get to reach out to you for more information?
Yeah, well, you'll find me on LinkedIn, Peter Dean, Dean, or you can reach me through the Prime Strategies website. That's primestrategies.co.nz. I'd love to hear from business people. They can reach out, book a free appointment to do a business health check, which we always like to do initially with our potential clients.
Perfect. We will have a link in the description for how people can reach out to you. So thank you so much for being on the podcast.
You're welcome.